This 7-year-old kid was reading a high-level math book. The uncle picked her up and carried her to the school bus. At school, Mary realized that the teacher was teaching 3 plus 3 equal what? Mary was impatient. 3 plus 3? Really? What kind of school is this anyway? The teacher was a little annoyed. She invited Mary to stand up and ask, 15 plus 17, 32. The teacher's smile froze. Next, the teacher raised the difficulty. Well, what is 57 plus 135, 192? Correct answer. The teacher was very surprised. This time she raised the difficulty again. What 57 multiplied by 135 is? This time Marie could not answer immediately. But when the teacher continued teaching, 7,695. The teacher did not believe her eyes. She immediately took out the computer. Correct answer. The teacher decided to test Mary. The next day there was a test. The teacher had not finished handing the paper. Mary already finished. The teacher had prepared beforehand. She gave Mary a second test. This time it was no longer a simple calculation, but functions of high school math. Mary still answered very quickly. Now the teacher finally believed this girl was a genius. The school came to find her uncle, hoping he could send Mary to transfer to another school. They even ensured that Mary'd get a full scholarship. But Frank refused. Besides, he said that Mary had to study there, unless they expelled her. The teacher found it very strange. Why did Frank refuse such a good opportunity? She looked up Frank on the internet and found out that Mary's mother was a famous mathematician. But she chose to kill herself just when her research was completed. The teacher found Frank to know more. Frank told her Mary's biological father left her mother before she was pregnant. And grandmother Mary just wanted her mother to study mathematics. When she learned of the pregnancy, she did not contact anymore. So Frank was in charge of raising Mary. He specialized in ship repair. Frank often took Mary out to sea to play. They weren't rich but happy. Until one day, Mary saw a woman standing in front of the door. It turned out to be the grandmother. The grandmother already knew Mary's ability. She wanted to bring Mary's back to Foster to complete her mother's research. But Frank disagreed. Mary's living a normal life was Diane's last wish. Mother and son left in disagreement. Not long after, the grandmother filed for court. She wanted to take custody of Mary. In the first trial, the grandmother won the right to visit. One weekend, she took Mary to Massachusetts. It had the world's best math institute. She took Mary to see a math professor. The professor had prepared a difficult problem. Looking at the article on the board, Mary kept quiet. The professor was a bit of contempt. Grandmother got angry and dragged Mary out. At this time, Mary said it was not that Mary couldn't do it. The problem was wrong, she even had the answer. Those complex functions were all written by a 7-year-old girl, impressed the best professor in the world. She was too short, she could only stand on a chair to write. Professor just dumbfounded looking at her because he did not think that the problem he purposely wrote incorrectly could be fixed correctly and solved perfectly. This was a genius girl. But strangely, the child's uncle didn't like her to study. Seeing she was solving math problems, he pulled her out of the study desk and took her to the beach to watch the sunset. She was like a sloth, climbing up and down her uncle. The girl right now didn't look like a genius girl anymore, but just an ordinary cheerful girl. This was what the uncle wanted. Because the girl's mother was once a genius, she was driven mad by the grandmother. In the end, she committed suicide. He didn't want Mary to be like that. So he raised her by himself. But a single guy bringing along a little girl was kind of weird. Once, the child came home early. She accidentally spoiled the affair of the teacher and uncle. The teacher shyly left. Frantic and shy, the uncle accidentally stepped on Legos. He finally burst out. "Can I just get 5 minutes of my own life?" Hearing that, Mary silently went to her room. The uncle immediately knew he missed the word. He said sorry to her immediately. The little girl was deeply hurt by her uncle's words. But Frank told her, "Last month you said I was the worst uncle in the world, 'cause I didn't buy you a piano. Did you mean that?" This is what we should learn from the uncle. He treated Mary equally while talking. She also loved him sincerely in return. The grandmother, after discovering Mary was a genius, constantly wanted to bring her home. The court sent people from the children's organization to negotiate. The investigator asked many questions. Mary looked a bit annoyed. She told the investigator, "He's a good person. I want to stay with him." The investigator asked her why. She said, "He wanted me before I was smart." Mary was very clear. Frank liked her. Grandma only liked her just because she was a genius. Once in court, Grandma wanted to gain custody, so she found Mary's father. The man, who had never met his daughter before, wanted to take her back to the grandmother. But Frank's lawyer was very helpful. He proved to the court that the father had never been responsible for his daughter. He had no capacity to decide custody of the child. When he got home, Frank told Mary, "Your father came today." The little girl was heartbroken. She didn't understand why her father didn't want to see her. Frank thought for a bit. He brought Mary to the hospital. They waited for so long, until the sky got dark. A man came out from the surgeon's room. "It's a boy." At this time, he told Mary, "That's exactly how it was when you were born." The little girl finally smiled. Then she ran to congratulate the family. This was Frank's love, although he had no money, but he can use any way to let her feel that no matter what she did, he loved her forever. Mary would have a warm family, but the grandmother still didn't give up, because she wanted to have Mary. She immediately filed a third case. And this time the care for the little girl gradually turned into compassionate motherhood. This mother called her son to court to gain custody of Mary. They turned their faces, touched each other's pain. Frank's lawyer gave evidence. "You mistreated your daughter to the point of suicide. After her death, you didn't even visit your niece once. Now, how can you take custody of Mary?" The mother's lawyer said, now that the uncle was poor and had no money, how can he give Mary a good future? Then he began forcing. He even said Frank let Mary go to that school because of the jealousy of his sister's talent and reputation. To get revenge on his sister, he deliberately buried Mary's talent. In the end, the attorney said, "Tell us, is your continued guardianship really in the best interest of this little girl?" Frank was quiet for a moment, then said, "Yes, but at night, watching Mary play." Frank sighed again. Actually, Frank was starting to wonder. He just wanted to respect her will, let Mary live a happy life. But was it the best way? At this time, the lawyer came to advise him. Grandmother gave in. She may not take custody of Mary, but Frank had to send Mary to a better family. Frank thought for a long time, deciding to visit the family. There were a yard and indoor swimming pool, and there was also a piano Mary desired. He couldn't give Mary those things. Frank agreed. He brought Mary there. She cried and said, "Please don't leave me here." But Frank was determined to leave. Not long after, he visited Mary, but he was told that Mary did not want to see him anymore. Frank was heartbroken. One day, he suddenly learned that Mary's adopted cat had been sent to death. Frank rushed like crazy to the hospital to save him. Frank knew grandmother Mary was allergic to cat hair. She fooled Frank. Mary was living with her grandmother. Frank rushed over. As expected, the grandmother invited a tutor and began to pull out her genius plan. Frank was mad. He gave his grandmother an essay and wanted to take Mary away, but Mary ran away. Frank ran after Mary, but Mary was angry, starting hitting her uncle. They all considered Mary a genius, an adult, but no one ever cared about her thoughts. Frank cried too. He knew he was wrong. If Mary is this amazing, smart, sweet human being, then I must be doing something right. Finally, Mary smiled. She tightly hugged her uncle. This time, they wouldn't be apart anymore. Returning home, Frank confronted his mother. But this time, the grandmother didn't argue anymore. Because the thesis Frank gave her was the research result of Mary's mother. She finished it. Grandmother did not understand why her daughter did not publish. Frank replied, "To revenge you." She asked to wait for her mother to die before publishing this thesis. Grandmother was dumbfounded. She never thought Diane would hate her so much. Frank negotiated with her. She published this essay, and Mary would be under his care. Grandmother hesitated. In the end, she still chose the thesis. Frank took Mary away. The grandmother called the institute while looking at her daughter's notes. She froze. There were tears of daughter on every piece of paper. This woman started to cry. At this moment, she finally understood. Her expectation she had placed on her daughter's shoulder had hurt Diane so much. A moment later, the line connected. She immediately returned to her senses. She discussed the issue of publication with the professor. In the end, Mary's life still changed. During the day, Mary studied advanced math. After school, she played with her peers. This was not to fulfill the wishes of the grandmother, nor to fulfill the wishes of the uncle. Mary lived the life she wanted. Studying and playing are not in conflict. Respect and develop the baby's divinity, and you will easily realize that each child is a genius.